Hey there, Laz here. Today I wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind for a little bit. Elden Ring Nightreign. It's a game. It's a game I actually really like. But recently I've been getting back into Elden Ring proper. I finally paid for the DLC, and it's been pretty good so far. I like it. I know not everyone does, but so far it's been pretty good. But that, of course, means my social media pages are all full of Elden Ring content. For some reason. Because they're tracking me, obviously. But that leads me into what spurned on the motivation to make this video. I kept getting Elden Ring posts, but I got a post from the official Elden Ring account. And I think it was just promotion for the Tarnished edition of Elden Ring with the 2 new starting classes, or whatever. And that's not the point of this video. The comment section of that video is, however, because in it, most of what I saw were people asking, oh, where's the Nightreign update? Oh, why'd you abandon Nightreign? And that got me thinking about the whole situation around Nightreign, because as much as I personally enjoy the game, there are certainly some faults with it. They are not small faults either. They are things most companies would catch, most things that would be resolved or completely avoided in the first place. But for each of those issues, I think there's a lot that redeems Elden Ring Nightreign. And so I wanted to talk about whether or not Elden Ring Nightreign is a failure. And with the highly anticipated, I don't know. I personally want it, but I'm not sure if anyone else does at this point. But with the Duskbloods supposedly on the way this year, what can we learn from Nightreign to see where it did well and where it stumbled? What can we learn from that? And what can we expect from Duskbloods to have it succeed? Let's start by defining what I mean by failure. Most fans of this game, of Elden Ring, of Souls games in general, would consider Nightreign to be mostly a failure. Some people even feel that the game was a cash grab, something that was not made out of love, out of passion, rather something made out of a need for money, or greed even. And because of that greediness that some fans feel, they feel that Elden Ring Nightreign is a failure to the fans, that it failed to live up to its potential as a Elden Ring Fortnite. There's not really a better game to compare it to. It failed at what it could have been, and most fans feel that it did disappoint them. At least the vocal fans, I should say. Because, like I mentioned, I myself really enjoy the game. So by that metric, I don't want to measure Elden Ring Nightreign as a failure by the fans, meaning I want to ask whether or not it accomplished its own goals. Was it financially successful? Did it give the team behind Nightreign the experience with a co-op, with running a somewhat live service game? Did it give them the experience to actually write character-driven stories? And I'll expound on that later. Before I do, it makes it sound as if the characters in older Souls games aren't really told. I don't mean it like that. I mean as in the characters you play, which I will get into later. Let's start with the financial success of Nightreign. A quick Google search gave me around 5 million copies from at least a year ago. So let's say 5.5 million to really, you know what? No, let's say 5 million. 5 million copies of this game sold. Priced at $40, that comes to quite a lot of money, just from the plain math without considering sales tax or the cut Steam or whatever platform would take. That's about 200 million, if my numbers are right. I really hope, because it would be really embarrassing to be wrong about that. So, just with that vague number, probably not representative of what they actually made, but with that general idea, that's probably a pretty good number, considering Elden Ring Nightreign uses a lot of Elden Ring's assets. So, financially, and this is my least concerned category, because I don't really care whether or not a company does well. I like FromSoft, but at the end of the day, if their product doesn't sell well, I'm not heartbroken about it. So, all in all, financially, Nightreign did not fail. It did pretty well, likely on a pretty small, at least relatively small budget to what they very likely made. Next, we'll talk about whether or not Nightreign lived up to its potential as a roguelike, battle royale, Souls-like. A very, underdeveloped genre, I'd say. So, what's the actual formula of the game? This will be much more easy to understand if you have watched or played Elden Ring or Nightreign or both. If not, I'll do my best to explain. Kind of like Fortnite, you drop into a map, and it's the same map with shifting locations, so it is a bit randomized. But the idea is you have 2 days to explore, to kill enemies, find new locations, loot, and slay bosses, as well as leveling up. And at the end of each of these days, you enter the night, where you have to face one of the night bosses. Each night boss is determined by which Night Lord you go after. Before you actually jump into a game, you have to choose who you're after. There are seven Night Lords, who they are the final fight you'll have at day 3. We're jumping around a little bit. My apologies. But each of them has their own pool of bosses that can appear depending on... I mean, it's just RNG, who you get that night. We'll talk about that in a minute. But, like I mentioned earlier, at the end of day 3, or the beginning of day 3, you fight the Night Lord. They are all unique bosses. And after that, whether you lose or fail, that's kind of up to you. Hopefully you win. You defeat the Night Lord, and they're checked off, and you go about your business killing the rest of them until you kill... I think you have to kill 4 of them, and at which point maybe there's 8. Regardless, at that point, the final Night Lord will appear, Healstore, who is the final boss of the game, barring DLC. And once you face off against Healstore, each character has their own ending, depending on whether or not you completed their storylines, and depending what you do after, like during the ending sequence. That's very hastily, somewhat scattered summary of Elden Ring Nightreign. My footage should help you understand what is actually going on, I hope. So, if I wasn't clear, my bad, I guess. I don't script my videos. I write out points. But enough about that. Where does this formula sit on a scale of good to bad? And I think, personally, this is a very personal video. I try to be as unbiased as I can. But when it comes to something subjective, as in, do I like this system, I tend to put it on the more good end of the spectrum. I like the idea of incorporating roguelike elements where you have to scavenge and scour for your own weapons, you have to fight greater challenges, bosses who can drop upgrades. There's passive upgrades, there are just straight weapon upgrades, there are different tiers of weapons, and even if you get screwed over and you don't get anything for your character, nothing good, you still get the runes to help level up your character. There are merchants who sell you revives if you play solo, which I almost exclusively do. They'll give you physics that will give you special effects. There are churches around the map to increase the number of healing flasks you have. There is a lot to do each day. And I really like how fast-paced the game is. Elden Ring is, outside of bosses, it is fairly slow-paced. I enjoy how Nightreign changes the formula of... Elden Ring isn't necessarily slow, but when you go to Nightreign, you can feel how much faster the game is. There's a timer over your head. There's a storm, the night itself, closing in on you. The fights need to go fast because you need to collect as much as possible. I like that kind of rush. It feels good. But not everything about this system is good. The first thing I have a big problem with is the map. Now, in Fortnite, because I don't play any other battle royales or anything like this, I don't play a lot of Fortnite either, but it's the easiest one to think of. The map changes over time. I think you go a season or two before any major changes are made to the map, at which time there will be a new area removed, just things to spice it up. Nightreign has randomly generated structures, but they can all only be in certain spots with very specific... the pool is very small. For example, each of the places on the map, the ruins, the cathedrals, whatever, they typically have an element associated with them. If you go to one of the cathedrals with the holy element next to it, I think the only thing you will find there are the bubble guys. I don't know their names. With the trumpets that shoot bubbles at you. I'm pretty sure that's the only thing for holy cathedrals. It just feels like there is options, there is randomization, but at the same time, the options are very stagnant. And the map itself is fairly small. It ends up working for the game because you are moving so fast. You typically don't have enough time to just run across the map and back. You could, I'm pretty sure. I think I've done it. But that's a very bad idea. But because there is very little changing, because once you've seen the variety of structures it could be, you will notice that it's just the same structures over and over again. It gets very repetitive. Leading off of repetitive... I was trying to, use my big vocabulary. It didn't work. Speaking of repetitive, the bosses. I think it is extremely strange to tie night bosses to a specific pool based on which Night Lord you are hunting. Now, I understand the idea that, as you go down the list, it gets harder and harder. We don't want to put Stormcaller King, Stormcaller King, what is wrong with me? Nameless King under the first Night Lord. And I do get that. But there's a problem with that. Because if you are bad, like me, you will be fighting the same few bosses every time you try to fight a specific Night Lord. If you don't like a specific Night Lord, you're not going to find those bosses anywhere else. I think there is some overlap, but still, there are certain bosses that can only be found in certain Night Lord expeditions. I understand the need to make the game more balanced, as to get harder as you go down the list. But afterwards, after you beat the game, I think it should have given you the option to allow all bosses to pop up anywhere. Because when you fight the same ancient dragon every night who kills you, or you always fight the tree sentinel, I forgot his name. When you are always fighting those same bosses that you can just name off the top of your head, Gaping Dragon, another one, the Freya's Deer Duke, I think that's his name. When you can name them like this, that's a problem, because this was advertised as a bit of a crossover between Dark Souls and Elden Ring, reviving old bosses from Dark Souls to put them into Elden Ring and feel refreshed, with new mechanics, new visuals, to really bring them to life in our modern day. And it fails at that, because you can't always find the bosses you want. If you're like me and you hate the pests, I don't know their names. I don't know the list of bosses off the top of my head. But if there's a boss you really like in that, and you really hate the pests, you just won't go fight them. Because whether or not you just really hate the fight, you can't fight them if you're playing alone, or some other reason that just really puts you off from that. There could be, think of a boss. Maybe Godric is there, and you really, really like Godric. I don't know why. But just for this scenario, if that's the case, okay, you'll never fight Godric in Nightreign, because he's tied to a Night Lord you despise. And I think that's the second biggest failure of the Nightreign. Repetition is constant throughout this game. The weapon choices are very... I think it's better than the boss selection and the map selection, but it runs into the same problem. Repetition really is this game's second biggest weakness. I think its first biggest weakness. There's a lot of things I think deserve that number one, but the thing I would give it to is that the game lacks content. And that comes back to the repetition thing. The Nightreign DLC is good. It adds in a whole nother map with more bosses, DLC weapons, 2 new original Night Lords, 2 new playable characters and their stories. It is quite a bit. But I think that the game probably needed something like that before a DLC. I think the game probably should have launched with more planned support. Really, after the game released, we had the, I think Everdark Sovereigns, I think that's what they call them. They're basically powered up versions of certain Night Lords that appear every week or two. And that was the most support we got. We got some balancing changes, okay, but really, what limited content was in the game was all we got. And that really strikes at the heart of many people's problems with the game. And it's one I won't deny. It is a big problem with the game. But there's a reason I've spent so much time on this point specifically. One, because it's the most important part. It's the game's biggest fault, in my opinion. Faults, I should say. But there's a reason other than just to criticize the game, to focus on this. Because, like I mentioned earlier, the Duskbloods is supposed to release this year. I want the team to learn from this. This really leads into the next point. Can the team learn from their mistakes in Nightreign? Can they look and find the real, true, fair criticism that they can really absorb to and act on in the Duskbloods? A very similar type of game to what they made with Nightreign. And I'd like to think that the team behind Nightreign really is going to absorb the fair criticism. I think that's... I don't know if it's just straight out confirmed, or this is just a very speculative thing, but the idea of putting a new developer, or lead developer, on this project with newer people is to try and make the ideas of Miyazaki, the design philosophy, to nourish it in another person, in the whole team, really. Nightreign is an experiment, and if it were just an experiment, it wouldn't be so controversial. But the fact that it is a game, a product, something that costs money, that's what sows so much discourse around it. But, like I said, I really hope that they learn from this going forward. We did see some changes to Elden Ring Nightreign with balancing, and we saw that in the DLC, whether or not it was planned. The DLC was planned beforehand, but whether or not the changes of adding so many new weapons, new bosses, new Night Lords, these things were all probably imagined at the beginning, but to what scale they grew from feedback, we'll never know. But we can hope that they really did listen to our voices about this. The ones being fair, I should say. And until the Duskbloods comes out, we can't really say whether or not the developers failed in this aspect, whether or not they learned from Nightreign. Hopefully we get something about the Duskbloods soon. I believe, I don't know off the top of my head whether or not Miyazaki is directly involved in the Duskbloods. I don't know, honestly, but I do hope that whether or not the Nightreign team is directly involved with Duskbloods or not, that the knowledge they gained from this passes on to the Duskbloods team. And outside of making a very not co-op, but roguelike game like this, I hope that they take their experience with co-op and put what they learned into their next Souls game, true Souls game. Because probably like a year ago, I was gonna make a whole video on the whole situation of Nightreign and really FromSoft's inability, its archaic design when it comes to multiplayer with online stuff, and Nightreign was a step forward for them, really, if you compare any of their old games, really. Each one of their most popular Souls games, maybe all of them even, they have seamless co-op mods because their methodology of going about it is just strange, to put it nicely. It's archaic, I think. So that's another thing I hope they take away from Nightreign. And I'm writing this as if Nightreign just wrapped up. It's been over for a bit. But, like I said, my motivation to make this was sparked by the continued discourse and controversy of it. But in the face of its greatest failures, Nightreign had a very amazing part to it. The characters of Nightreign. The playable characters. It's something that, in most Souls games, is very understated. Now, for some context, I have played Bloodborne, Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3, and a little bit of Sekiro. And that's just from Software games. Oh, and I guess a little bit of Dark Souls 1. And so, in all the ones I've gotten fairly far into, really with just the exception of Sekiro, the characters you play as, while having importance to the story, they are very self-inserts. And it works for the games, because that's what they were designed around. But when you look at Nightreign and its characters, and you see that it has the same care and storytelling put into the NPCs, I think it makes you enjoy the characters you play as more than just some nameless tarnished or some forgive me, I forget the name of the undead in Dark Souls. It might just be the undead or unkindled. My apologies. It's been a while. Anyway, what I really appreciate about this character focus is that I really want to see this in a full-fledged Souls game. And I forgot to mention it, but Sekiro may have done this. I've not gotten very far into Sekiro. So maybe it seems more character-focused. So maybe they've already done this. But I couldn't tell you because I want to experience it one day, but I'll get around to it. So, I could talk about all the characters, and I'm not going to, because I think, well, one, it would just take way too long. But I think that just explaining one of them, their story is enough to really get across how much care and detail is put into these stories, how important it is that these characters actually have their own motivations besides our own. I would love to talk about the Wilder and the Duchess, but as much as I love them, they deserve their own video because I think their story is very good. So instead, I decided I wanted to talk about the Revenant because I really enjoy their story. To summarize it, the Revenant is a puppet, somewhat similar to that of Ronnie. However, it's not exactly clear whether or not the puppet is really the person, the soul inside of it. I gotta cut this part out, huh? To summarize the Revenant's story, it is a being similar to Ronnie, that which is a puppet, with some being inside of it. With Ronnie, it's very clear that it is Ronnie, her soul. With the Revenant, it's more up in the air. Their story revolves around a family who was attacked and murdered. And the daughter of the family, a fairly prestigious one at that, was hiding away as the attacker came in and killed their parents. And eventually they were found as well. They cared for a puppet. They used to apply their own makeup, treating it really like a doll, or maybe a sister. And as that child died, the puppet awoke. It assumed the will of that little girl. And by the end of its remembrance, or its storyline, you visit the manor. You face the monsters there. Metaphorical. Well, physical, but they are metaphorical monsters. And after you face them, the Revenant comes to terms that it may not be that girl, but it will carry on living in her place, as if it were her. accepting that it cannot be her. It will live in honor of her, I should say. And of course, the story is a lot more nuanced than that, and I'm speaking from memory, because the game needs to re-download so I can go get footage. So maybe this part will be cut out. I hope not, because I don't really want to re-record. But all this to say that that's a very heartbreaking, tragic, compelling character story. It puts you in the place of someone with motivations beyond their own. A character who doesn't know their full motivations or understand what they are completely. And I think that is really good, healthy for the Souls franchise. Because John Elden Ring is a little boring. Bike is an NPC in Elden Ring that a lot of people think is fascinating, really interesting. Really, all the Souls games have at least one NPC that we find very interesting. We all find, I hope most of us find it interesting, the lore of the games, the stories behind them. These are all very intricately woven tales. And when we are included in that, or at least the characters we play as, are actually woven into that narrative beyond just the prophesized one who will do such and such. When we actually have a character who has lived in this world, a story that we can see, we can feel, impact the choices they make in the story, it enhances the story. I think this is where another Souls-like game, Lies of P, really excels. It is probably tied for me with Elden Ring. I'm more of a new-gen Souls player, so I prefer the more modern games. And I think Lies of P really matches Elden Ring for me. It's much more character-driven because the character you play as is, without spoiling anything, the character you play as is so integral to what sets off the game and what finishes the game. I think the importance of you being you is just what makes the game so much more compelling than that. Something like Dark Souls or Bloodborne. Not to say that I dislike either of those, but the fact that these characters in Nightreign, Lies of P, maybe Sekiro, the fact that they have their own motivations, their own character beyond us, is really good. And I think that's another thing the team should take away from Nightreign to put into Duskbloods and beyond. I think if there was one thing I want them to take away, to put into their next major game, or even their small games, it would be to have more character-driven player characters. A player character who is not some self-insert or blank slate. I don't want to play as Link. I want to play as somebody with a real motivation in the world, a real stake in the world. With that, I think Elden Ring Nightreign is not a failure. It surely stumbles in its gameplay formula. What it does well with its remembrances, with its characters, with moving forward with FromSoft's whole thing about co-op and online, I think it ultimately, given that they really take what they learned here and apply it to Duskbloods, it is a success. Now, if Duskbloods comes around and we see these same issues unaddressed, or even worse, I will come back to this topic, and I will demean them for that, because FromSoft is not some perfect company. We see it with Nightreign. We see it with all their games. there are problems. It becomes a real problem when they don't learn from it. But I have faith in it, in FromSoft. They are one of the better companies for games. They really care. And I think that doesn't stop at Duskbloods. So, with all that said, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. I hope you were entertained, at least. Entertained. Entertained? What? This was really fun to make. My thoughts were a little scatterbrained. I apologize for that. I just didn't feel like scripting this one. So, I really spoke from the heart on this one, which I feel like was important for this game, because I think so many people have a problem with this game, understandably so, but I feel like to get across my point on what I felt about this game, to analyze whether it succeeded or failed from a point of view outside of giving or failing the fans, I wanted to speak personally, or more personably, not about my experiences with it, but trying to speak from really what a player feels and what they experience from the game. And that, I think that manifested in me talking about the problems of it for so long, which I got carried away. I kind of ragged on it for like 10 minutes, but this video is long enough, so I'm going to cut myself off here. Thank you again so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next one. See you.